Hey everyone, welcome to Alpha to Sky. The freedoms of the air and the Tokyo Convention are an important part of air regulation. So, without further ado, let's get started. So, along with the Chicago Convention, we had two more things. Those are the International Air Services Transit Agreement and the International Air Transport Agreement. Right? These were also signed in 1944. So these agreements gives us some freedoms of air. The first one is the technical freedoms of air, that is under the International Air Services Transit Agreement. So under technical freedoms of air, we have the first freedom, which is right to fly over a country without landing. So it gives basic flying rights to airlines of one country to fly over another country without landing. Then we have the second freedom of air, which is right to land for technical reasons. So any aircraft flying over another country has the right to land for technical reasons, which are refueling, maintenance, etc. But it cannot pick up or drop any passengers or cargo. Right. So it means an airline can land in a foreign country for all these things, refueling, maintenance, emergency, crew change, etc. But it cannot pick up or drop off passengers, cargo, or mail in the country. So most important thing is that it is ratified by India. The International Air Services Transit Agreement is ratified by India. Next, we have the International Air Transport Agreement. So it provides us the commercial freedoms of air. The first two freedoms that we saw were technical freedoms of air. Now we have the commercial freedoms of air. The third freedom of air, the right to carry passengers or cargo from your own country to another country. When we say your own country, it is the country of registration of that particular aircraft. So, for example, a Delta flight that carries passengers from Amsterdam to Atlanta, it is using the third freedom of air. Fourth freedom of air, the right to pick up passengers or cargo from a foreign country and bring them back to your own country. So you are picking up passengers and cargo from another country which is not the country of registration of that aircraft, and then you're bringing them back to your own country, which is the registration country. So an example could be an Emirates flight that picks up passengers from Mumbai and flies them back to Dubai. Next, we have the fifth freedom of air, which says that which provides the right to pick up passengers or cargo in one foreign country and drop them off in another as part of a flight that starts or ends in your own country. This is a bit tricky. Let's understand it using an example. So take the example of a Singapore Airlines flight. So it is flying from Singapore to Delhi and then to London. So basically, this freedom of air, the fifth freedom of air, says that you have the right to pick up passengers or cargo in one foreign country and drop them off in another. So this Singapore Airlines flight, picked up passengers from Delhi and then dropped them off in London because it was starting from Singapore. So Singapore was part of the journey of this flight. So that's why this flight is able to pick up passengers from one country and drop them off in another country. So it is using the fifth freedom of air. So this basically allows the airlines to connect two foreign countries as long as your own country or the country of registration is part of the journey of the road. And most important, this is not ratified by India. So India has not ratified the International Air Transport Agreement. Okay, so let's talk about Tokyo Convention. On the right, you can see the image of Tokyo Tower, which is beautifully illuminated. Right. So this convention talks about the offenses and certain other acts which are committed on board aircraft, the unlawful acts that are committed on board aircraft. There are several conditions when this convention is applicable. So the Article 1 talks about the scope of the application. So when this convention is applicable and in what scenarios, that is discussed in Article 1. This convention applies to offenses and acts on board aircraft, acts that jeopardize safety or discipline in the aircraft. So this is applicable only to the acts that jeopardize safety or discipline in the aircraft when it is in flight. The aircraft may be in flight on the surface of the high seas or any other area outside the territory of any state. So when we say in flight, it refers to the time period when the power is applied for the purpose of takeoff and till the time when the landing run ends. So this is the time period when this convention is applicable. Any unlawful acts that happen during this time period comes under this convention and will be handled as per the guidelines of this convention. This aircraft must be registered in a country that has signed the Tokyo Convention. So this is applicable only when that aircraft is signed under a country that has signed the Tokyo Convention, right? This is not applicable to military, customs, or police aircraft of any countries. So the second article says that this convention does not authorize action against political offenses, offenses based on racial discrimination, offenses based on religious discrimination, right? So this convention only applies to the acts that jeopardize the safety and discipline of the aircraft, right? It is not applicable to these offenses that are mentioned under Article 2. Article 3 says that the country of registration has main authority, right, to deal with the crimes or acts committed on board. And every country that agrees to the convention must make laws to ensure that they have jurisdiction over aircraft registered in their country. Right? So they should make their laws to ensure their jurisdiction. Then this convention does not stop other countries from practicing their national laws if applicable. So if they have their national laws, any of their national laws applicable to that scenario, then they can proceed with that. This convention does not stop them from proceeding with their national laws. Next is Article 4. Article 4 says that the countries other than country of registration should not interfere with aircraft in flight to exercise criminal jurisdiction over cases on board. So the countries which are not the country of registration of that aircraft should not interfere with that aircraft when it is in flight to exercise their criminal jurisdiction, right? And there are several exceptions to this. The countries do have some rights when they can interfere. So let's look into those exceptions. The first one is the offense affects that country. So if there was an offense on board the aircraft and that offense affects the country, even though it is not the country of registration, it can still interfere and exercise its criminal jurisdiction. Next, the offense is committed by or against a resident of that country. Now, if the offense is committed by or against a resident of that country has the right to exercise their criminal jurisdiction. The offense is against the security of that country. So if the offense committed on board is against the security of that country, which is not the country of registration of that aircraft, that country can still exercise their criminal jurisdiction against that offense. The offense breaches any aircraft rules or regulations of that country. So if this particular offense breaches any aircraft rules or regulations of that country laid down by that country, then the country can interfere and exercise their criminal jurisdiction. It is required by the country to maintain its multilateral international agreements. If the country has multilateral international agreements with other countries, and to maintain those agreements, it needs to interfere with those offenses, then it can do so. Right? So these were the exceptions when a country which is not the registration country of an aircraft has the right to interfere to exercise their criminal jurisdiction. Other than these cases, the countries cannot interfere when the aircraft is in flight. Now, we have some articles which give certain powers to the aircraft commander. Right? Article 5. This rule does not apply to offenses committed while the aircraft is flying over its own country, state of registration, or over the high seas or international areas, unless one of the following conditions is met. The last takeoff or next intended landing is in a different country. So, if an aircraft is taking off from its own country and landing in the same country, these rules do not apply over that aircraft. There are certain other rules that apply, and the situation is handled using those rules. Right? But these particular rules do not apply over that aircraft. Again, there are certain exceptions. So the first exception is if the last takeoff or next intended landing is in a different country. So the last takeoff of that aircraft or the next intended landing, if it is in flight, the next intended landing, if it's in a different country other than the country of registration, then these rules apply. Or if the aircraft enters the airspace of another country with the offender still on board. So the offender who committed the offense is still on board and the aircraft enters the airspace of another country. In those cases also these following rules apply. If there is a forced landing, the rules of this chapter apply until authorities of a state take control. If there is a forced landing in a different country, then these rules, the rules of this chapter, still apply until the authorities of that country take the situation into their control. So Article 6. So in Article 5, we saw the conditions when these rules apply and they do not apply. Now we'll be looking into the actual rules. The aircraft commander can take the reasonable actions, including restraining a person if required to. So the aircraft commander has the authority under Article 6 of the Tokyo Convention to take reasonable action. So when we say reasonable actions, the action taken should be really required to get the situation in control. When there is an offense committed in flight, the action taken by the commander should be really required to get the situation in control. So that is a reasonable action. They should not go beyond that. So if that action is required to maintain safety, maintain order and discipline, and the aircraft, if that action is required to deliver him to the competent authority. So competent authorities are the authorities of that country, and they will be taking over when the aircraft lands. So basically these activities are allowed to keep the aircraft and everyone on it safe, maintain order and discipline in the plane, right, and help hand over the person to the proper authorities for further actions. The aircraft commander can ask crew members for help to restrain a person. They can also ask the passengers for help, but passengers are not required to assist. It's an optional. It's their choice. Next, Article 7. It talks about the measures of restraint should not continue post landing unless. So whatever reasonable actions were taken by the commander or by the help of crew or passengers, they should not continue post landing. And there are certain exceptions to this. The first exception is the place of landing is a non-contracting state and the authorities refuse to disarm embarkation. So the person is still on board and he has been restrained and the flight has landed, but the place of landing is a non-contracting state, a state or a country which is not which has not signed the Tokyo Convention. And that's why the authorities of that country refuse to disembarkation. So in that case, the restraint can be continued even the flight has landed. Second exception is when the restraint is still required to hand over the person to the correct authorities. So the flight has landed, but the restraint is still required to have that person in control until he is handed over to the correct authorities. In that case, the restraint can continue. Forced landing happens and commander is unable to hand over to authorities. So there was a forced landing that happened when the person was on board, and the commander is unable at that moment, he is unable to hand over to the authorities. In such cases, the measures of restraint can continue. Now this is an interesting one. So the person agrees to continue his travel under restraint. He is under restraint. The person who has committed the offense is under restraint, but he agrees to continue his travel, right, under restraint, being under restraint. So in those cases also, the measures of restraint can continue. After landing, the commander should inform the authorities about the restraint as soon as possible. Right? This is straightforward. All right, we covered the articles of the Tokyo Convention, right? To go through them again if required. We'll be going through some questions. We'll be solving a few questions in the next video that will deepen our understanding about these articles, and also the freedoms of air, which is very important. Because remember, the best preparation for tomorrow is doing your best today. Thank you.